Los Angeles County about 3 years ago. I was contacted by the wife of this gentleman. It was a divorce. The divorce occurred 15 years earlier. The gentleman had been remarried. His new wife contacted me because he had owned 40% of this property in conjunction with his ex-wife. His ex-wife had decided not to move on. His ex-wife had decided that the way she wanted to spend her life was going after her ex-husband. So, 15 years later, we show up in court because he no longer owns 40% of the property. She owns 100% of the property according to this deed. So I'm brought in by the husband to examine the deed. I go to the courtroom in Los Angeles County. The judge allowed me to come in and on lunch break, do an examination. Not a lot of time. So what I did here is I did a scan of this interspousal transfer deed. I also scanned the back of the deed because, interestingly, you can find information when you do a high-resolution scan. And when I scan at high resolution, it's 800 pixels per inch, which means every page is approximately 175 megabytes. You get a lot of detail that way. I scanned and looked at lots 18 and 19. That's another deed that they said, well, this deed came from this lot 18 and 19, and I own 40% of lot number 12. Well, do you? So here's the question. Here's the interspousal transfer deed for lot number 18 and 19. We just saw the one for lot 12. So what happens? Using Photoshop, I was able to extract only the text and overlay one on top of the other. Turn one to red, the other's black, so that way you can see how well do they comport. Now, do you notice anything interesting on here?
Well, the signatures line up exactly.
The signatures line up exactly.
I can't ever do that, even with my own signature.
Right. And does anything else line up exactly? Now, remember that these are photocopies, so therefore you're going to get a little distortion in the photocopy, which means that nothing's going to exactly superimpose, but it'll be close.
Notary stamp.
The notary stamp. Yep. Exactly. You notice the stamps above are different, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're not the same. But everything else lines up. So let's go further. What I didn't look at the original deed. I looked at, as per we just spoke about Federal Rules of Evidence, the definition of original, I looked at a photocopy. And something the photocopiers will do is they apply what are called trash marks. Trash marks are when there's a little speck of dust on the platen or there's a little defect on the drum or something of that nature. It'll leave a little speck on the image. So what I did on this is they're offset a little bit intentionally so we can see how close they are, but we can also see what aligns. And notice those little trash marks. That probably was a little speck of dust on the platen when that document was photocopied. Then when it was photocopied again, it just transferred that little dot. They're in the exact same spot. That tells me that one is a replica of the other. Also because the signatures line up, the notary stamp lines up, etc. Notice how well this lines up, except the red one says lot 12 // the one under it says lots 18 and 19. That's good evidence. Let's take it a little further. How was I able to find out how was this altered document made? Took this and we can see how well the signatures line up. That's in detail, that's good evidence. Then what I did is I superimposed the lot 12 // over the lot 18. And if you notice in the middle bar, what happened is whoever did this made a photocopy of the original document, which was the lot 18 and 19. They took a sharp instrument, scraped off the toner, took a typewriter, and typed in lot 12, and to cover up the 18 and 19, put // When you looked at this, it looked pretty good. It looked so good that the LA County recorder recorded the deed. But when we look at this under high resolution, we can see the ghost of the old numbers under the lot 12//. You can see it originally said lots 18 and 19. Can you see that? Let's look in more detail. So here's more examples of the alteration. And we can see when we look at the rear, for example, on here, you can see the old comma was there. We can see the old numbers are there, looking at it from the rear, because using the typewriter made an indentation on the new numbers. Here's in more detail. We can see that 75 is typed over a 51. That was another part of the deed, where they had to get rid of the old numbers and put in some new numbers. And going in more detail, we can see, and these are exhibits that I used in court to show how this was done. So we can see under the new numbers, you can see the ghosts of the old numbers, and part of that is because when they took the sharp instrument, they made an impression that they pushed down on the fibers. It actually made an impression to the back. On here, we can see where this number is typed over. Now, what was interesting is on the old document, it had number 7, as in here. And see this little indentation down there? That's because the old font had a little indentation at the end of the 7. When they typed over it with the new font, well, they didn't take that off because they figured, well, I'm putting a 7 on top of a 7, so who cares? Who's going to know the difference? Well, when you enlarge it, you can see that. And the 9, well, the 9 was there from the old numbers. And so they wanted a 9 at the end. It already had a 9, so they didn't have to do anything. But something else that's interesting. If we look carefully, you'll notice little white blobs in there. Any idea why there are little white blobs in the black ink?
Is that where the paper's uneven?
It's the paper's uneven, and why is the paper uneven?
They were doing their scraping and that kind of stuff.
Exactly. They were doing their scraping. That caused the paper fibers to get damaged, and in some spots they got pushed in. So when the new ink got put on top, it didn't cover those couple of little spots. So when we enlarge it, we can see how this was done.
With a regular laptop, or did you use special software?
I used Photoshop to do this. Yeah, and I used Photoshop, and then I used an Epson V700 scanner, which is a big scanner. Yeah. I took that up to the courthouse, and so you need to be able to get the detail in that's why I scan at 800 pixels per inch, because that gets you a lot. And even if it's black and white, I scan using color. The reason for that is because you're getting the depth, and by getting that depth, you can and getting the high resolution in Photoshop, you can enlarge without losing detail.
Did the trial attorney require a special foundation to be laid for your instrument, or did you do it?
I did it.
You did?
Yeah, and no one, well, it was kind of an interesting case because the ex-wife who was the plaintiff in the case, she was pro se. And she argued to the court, well, Your Honor, I can't afford to bring in a forensic person. Excuse me, ma'am, but don't you live in a $3 million house?
That's not my house. Anymore.
Right. So,
on a deed to a single lot, would it have been the practice to have put slashes in there at all?
I've never seen that, but I mean, to me that was a little
Yeah,
strange.
yeah.
But
Got you thinking.
I'm not the recorder, so maybe the recorder has seen that before. I wasn't there to challenge the formatting of the deed, just to determine is it authentic. And what was interesting was when it came time for cross, rather than crossing me, she started yelling at the judge. And the judge finally said, "Excuse me, ma'am, but you're supposed to ask questions of the witness." So it was interesting, and no, she did not prevail. And I don't know what happened after that. But my opinion was that one of the deeds was a replica, was made from the other deed.